Welcome into another edition of the All NFL Monday Huddle, Week 15 edition here as we get later and later into December. Adam Hoge from CHGO, along with Brack from PHNX. Nice win for the Cards yesterday, back on the winning track. You know, Bo, I was thinking about this. This is one of the unique things about the NFL and football, with there only being one game per week. You go on a 3-game losing streak, you throw in a bye in there, and all of a sudden you haven't won a football game in over a month. And that's what happened with the Cardinals.
Yeah, I mean, it was on the heels of a 4-game win streak too. So like they nearly had a no-loss November, but they ruined that coming out of the bye. And the fan base is like, are they going to win a game the rest of the season? It's crazy, just kind of the emotional roller coaster you go on. And it's strange here in the Valley, Hoge, and we'll get more into it when we break down this game. It's just like some people, they were not entertained. They were not impressed by a 30-point, performance by this offense. They needed to see more. The Cardinals did exactly what they needed to do and put themselves firmly back into the NFC West, playoff chase with a lot of implications on the line this upcoming week.
Yeah, and trust me, it might feel that way, but you could live in a world where you only score 3 points against the Patriots. Speaking from experience. We got a lot to get to on the show. Obviously, some big games yesterday, playoff implications, some injuries that could have Super Bowl implications. We have a new Super Bowl favorite this morning we got to discuss. We're going to have Wulf join us from PHLY to talk about the Eagles and Steelers game. And our guy, Joe Hoyt, down at DLLS, will talk some Cowboys-Panthers with us later, as we always like to do. Our best and worst from Sunday. I will start here, Bo, and I'm going to start with my best, a very specific play that happened in the Bengals-Titans game. And that was anytime you can get a guy like T'Vondre Sweat that big running with the football, sign me up for it. He gets the fumble recovery and picks it up, and what a stiff arm, first of all. Throws one guy down with a stiff arm, goes up the sideline, was refusing to go down, and then finally was dragged down in quite a kaboom on the sideline in the white paint once he finally went down. But that was just an unbelievable moment. Thoroughly enjoyed it. My best of the day. My worst also comes from this same football game, though, because this Bengals-Titans game had a combined 10 turnovers, 25 penalties, and one of 2 touchback situations we had yesterday with somebody dropping the football before going into the end zone. This one happened to be on, I believe it was a pick 6, or would have been a pick 6, if not a fumble recovery. Regardless, it would have been a defensive touchdown, and it was just dropped going into the end zone. So good 10-point win for the Bengals, but ugly football game overall down there in Nashville.
There was a lot of gross football that was going on this weekend. Did you see the Adonai Mitchell pick 6 from the Indianapolis Colts? That pretty much just sank their season right there. I mean, they're in a tight contest with the Broncos that turned out to be a laugher after the fourth quarter. Denver puts up 21. But if we're just highlighting specific plays, that's got to be the worst play of the weekend. But I was impressed once again. This is like my weekly love fest with the Buccaneers taking care of business, and this time against the good team, probably the best remaining team that they have on their schedule. They hang a 40-burger on Jim Harbaugh, Justin Herbert, and the Chargers on the road in L.A. and strengthen their grasp on the NFC South, where I know, the Falcons are going to be in action tonight as well with your Bears on the other Monday night game. But another decent win for the Buccaneers to hopefully, not hopefully, but win that division down there.
Yeah, it was a big one. And they did. They played some physical football against the Chargers, which usually, since Jim Harbaugh got there this season, not many teams have been able to do that. Mike Evans, a big day, 9 catches, 159 yards, and 2 touchdowns. You can't knock down Mike Evans. He's just going to keep coming back, no matter how old he is, whatever he's dealing with. Mike Evans is always going to be Mike Evans.
Are the
Biggest
Chargers
game.
done though? You think the Chargers have anything left in the tank? It was very admirable. I think that their first season under Jim Harbaugh to get where they've got 8-6 to compete in the AFC West, but with kind of an undermanned roster. You think they've got anything left in the tank? It feels like they're just, a couple key injuries there. The run game's not the same without J.K. Dobbins. I feel like the Chargers, we've seen their best football for the season.
Yeah, possibly, and they've lost 2 in a row now here, but a tough one against the Broncos coming up on Thursday this week. That'll actually be a pretty good game. But then they finish against the Patriots and Raiders. So, and they have a essentially 2-game lead right now for that last playoff spot. So I look, if the question is, can they make a deep playoff run? Probably not. But given what's still left in front of them, I would think that they still make the playoffs, and that's I would call that a win, obviously, in year 1 for Jim Harbaugh, for sure.
Yeah, no, big time. I completely agree with that. What else did you like from this week?
Well, let's start with the big game of the day, with the Bills and the Lions, because we had some injuries we got to talk about that were significant coming from this game, and also the Chiefs game that could affect things going down the road. But the Bills, this ended up being kind of close at the end, but this really seemed like the Bills were in control for most of this game, and a very impressive win over the Lions. 48 points put up on that Lions defense, a 48-42 win when it was all said and done. Lions hadn't lost in forever. So, that was it. Just you look at the Bills now, Bo, and they are they have 3 losses, but they also have 2 of the most impressive wins of the season. They go into Detroit and win, and then they also handed the Chiefs their only loss of the season.
Yeah, I mean, what Buffalo's been able to accomplish is, not to be overlooked, and I think that they are, no doubt about it, the team that's trending to be the Super Bowl favorite. As you mentioned, things are going to change there, and you look at the MVP performance from Josh Allen, even in a loss last week to the Rams, 6 total touchdowns, 3 in the air, 3 on the ground. He had another similar, that on less steroids, 2 touchdowns in the air and 2 on the ground. He's got 17 total touchdowns, no interceptions, I think, over his last 4 games. Josh Allen's playing the best football of his career at the right time, and just continue to kind of put an exclamation point on that with a win over the Lions. And yeah, I mean, there's some concern. I see that chat about McDermott and the defense, but still beating up on some really good teams. Like Kansas City, I know they're that Michael Myers component to the Bills. Like once the games matter even more in January, like the Chiefs have historically gotten it done. But I don't know if they have the offense and firepower to compete with Josh Allen this year. I mean, as they've done over and over again, they could prove me wrong, but it feels a little different to me this year.
And by the way, so Mahomes gets hurt in Kansas City yesterday. They're calling him week to week. Seems like that all adds up to possible high ankle sprain, which could be tricky. They got to be motivated to make sure he's right for January.
Yeah.
But look at this schedule. They dropped, just because of the Mahomes injury, they dropped from favorites against the Texans this coming week, to underdogs. Then they got to go to Pittsburgh. Then they got to go to Denver to finish. So if they don't have Mahomes here for a couple of these games, they got to. By the way, it's a quick turnaround. They got to play Saturday, and then they're playing on Christmas Day on Wednesday too. So it's bad timing there to be dealing with something like this. All of a sudden, the Bills, they're 2 games back of that 1 seed right now, but they would have the tiebreaker for beating the Chiefs head to head. It's possible the Bills can still come back and get the 1 seed, I believe. So that was an interesting development, and that is, I think, one of the reasons why, regardless of what happens with the seeding, Bo, the Bills are now the Super Bowl favorite in terms of Vegas odds, and you can see why with what they've been able to do here. so certainly going into Detroit and getting that win helps a lot.
The physicality that you saw on display, especially against the team that kind of owned the distinction of the most physical team in football in the Lions, and how they were slowing down that rushing attack.
Yeah.
I mean, nobody's done that and really neutralized what they do running the football. I know they had the injury to Montgomery, but Gibbs has held to 8 rushes for 31 yards. And Jared Goff had to try to play hero ball to get them back into it, and he nearly did it with 5 touchdown passes for himself. But even with the concerns, the high point totals and the loss to the Rams, you're right. I mean, they're just hanging around. And if things don't break right for KC, there's just no margin for error. And the Bills can certainly sneak into that, number 1 overall seed. Let's take a look at that playoff picture, if you don't mind, Emma. Like it is kind of getting a little muddled up at the top in both the AFC and the NFC. Here's the AFC. You got a couple of clinched, divisions for the Chiefs in the West and the Bills in the East, Steelers in the North, and Texans already got it locked up. But you could see some shuffling for sure at the top with the Bills. And I know the same could be said for the NFC, and we'll get into that. But Bills, you would have thought that was such a critical loss last week to the Rams, but they're right in the thick of things still for that number 1 seed.
Yeah, they still got a chance. And then meanwhile, on the NFC side, Detroit's taking a beating right now. I mean, they're obviously in and they're clinched for the playoffs, but that 1 seed with the loss yesterday is very precarious. The Eagles, they hold serve, they win, so they're right there with the Lions. The Lions still technically have the tiebreaker, but the Vikings, if they can win tonight, they are right there with both of those teams, same record at 12-2, and the Vikings, they hold their own destiny in their hands to win the NFC North if they can win out here, because you still got a game remaining with the Vikings and Lions still got to play each other in Week 18, which could be a really good game to close out the season. But you look at some of these injuries, and Lee McNeil torn ACL out for the year, and then a little bit before we started the show, news comes out that David Montgomery, he tore his MCL yesterday, and there's significant doubt that he's going to be able to return at all this season. So that running attack is everything for them. Obviously, they still have Jahmyr Gibbs, but if you've been watching the Lions this season, it's really kind of that 1-2 punch between those 2 guys. So this is a significant loss for the Lions, and all of a sudden that door is kind of wide open for the Eagles. Obviously, they've won 10 games in a row now. But even for the Vikings, we talked about a lot on last week's show that we got to start taking them more seriously for Super Bowl contenders. The door's open.
It is. Have you seen their final, 3 games even after tonight? They play the Bears tonight, and then they have the Seahawks on the road, and we'll see what happens with Geno Smith. I know he exited yesterday's Sunday Night Football loss with an injury. But Green Bay and then Detroit, they absolutely do. They control their own destiny, but man, they're probably, you'd be hard pressed to find a tougher schedule the rest of the season than what the Vikings have. But the opportunities there, in the luxury or lack thereof for both the Lions and the Vikings going into they're going to be playing a huge game in Week 18 just to try to jockey for that top spot. And unless Philly comes, out of nowhere, takes advantage of this tough slate and locks it up and maybe makes it a little bit easier decision for, Dan Campbell and KOC as far as how they want to kind of operate in the final week of the season.
Yeah, well, I think you got to consider this definitely a must-win tonight for the Vikings over the Bears. Cannot slip up. Eagles, to your point, the Eagles' schedule is much easier. They just get all 3 NFC East opponents left. They got to go to Washington, then they get Dallas at home and the Giants to close out the season. So I did see that the Vikings only have a 10% chance of actually getting the number 1 seed. But with that head-to-head against the Lions in Week 18, I don't think you can rule out the NFC North title still being there for them. So we'll see how this all plays out.
Don't have to go on the road that way, at least for the wild card round. That would help. That would be big time helpful. I mean, that U.S. Bank home field advantage. I mean, they would love to have that instead of having to go on the road potentially. as it stands right now, if they're the top, non-division winning playoff team, they'd have to take on, what is that? They'd have to go to Los Angeles and take on a Rams team. I don't know if they want to necessarily do that.
Yeah, no, there's a huge difference. Obviously, the way the NFL does their playoff structure, you want to at least win your division to get that home game. Huge difference dropping down to the 5 seed. A couple other nuggets I had from this Bills-Lions game. There was a fun moment. Dan Skipper getting a touchdown. You pay attention to the Lions. I think Dan Skipper and Dan Campbell have a tight bond. It seems like those two gritty guys, and so I think that that was rewarded there. And then I have to say though, way early onside kick call. There was 12 minutes left in this game. Lions get within 10, and Campbell goes for the onside kick. Like I get it. You're really struggling to get a stop defensively, but the odds of you recovering that, on top of that, the Bills just end up they catch it in stride and they're able to return it to basically set up an easy touchdown. You do wonder, maybe this could have, with the fact that the Lions still came back and had a chance for another onside kick later, had they tried to kick it, get a stop, maybe this still could have been different. But I just thought that was a little bit early to go for the onside kick. We know he's aggressive, but that was really aggressive.
I mean, we see his, the aggressiveness work to his favor last week. Going for it, 4th and inches, when they could just set up for the go-ahead field goal, and they get the first down and they just can run the clock out and win the game that way. And then this week he's aggressive in calling the early onside kick. So you see how that plays out, and you look like a genius one week, and then you kind of look a little foolish the next week, and that's just kind of what it's still good to be Dan Campbell, and I'm sure he'll be more often than not applauded for his aggressiveness because it's working. I mean, speaking of the skipper play, and it seems like on a weekly basis, watching Ben Johnson pull that out of his bag of tricks, another gadget play. I mean, with him being in the mix for the Bears, I mean, does that get you excited to have that kind of creativity potentially incoming?
There was a hook and ladder later in the game too.
Yeah.
Which I heard Travis Kelce talking about last week. He was trying to make the case because he's lateral twice this season back to teammates on plays that were not designed to do it.
Yeah.
And he's like a big believer that, the lateral isn't used enough in football. I would agree with it.
Cardinals for that. They had a touchdown against the Cardinals. Amon-Ra to, I think, David Montgomery. They had a nice little hook and ladder that went for 6. I mean, it's worked quite a bit. I mean, Ben Johnson, there's no doubt about it. He's the most creative play caller in the league. I'm talking about, I'm not saying anything profound here. Just he does it week in and week out, and it's impressive.
No, yeah, it gets you excited to think about that. Especially with pairing him up with Caleb Williams. I think if you were to do a popularity poll right now in the city of Chicago, no question, Ben Johnson is the favorite among fans right now, although it's definitely not unanimous. So we're talking a little bit about top of the NFC. What if the doors open? Well, it certainly is open now for the Eagles, who have won 10 straight games, and it is time to bring in our guy, Bo Wulf, who covers the Eagles for PHLY. And certainly, we were just talking off the top, Bo, about the Cardinals had just gone over a calendar month without seeing a victory. The Bears are now up to 2 months since they last won a football game. So what's it like to see 10 wins in a row?
It's interesting. We don't measure it as like months since the last time the Eagles lost. We measure it in Nick Sirianni haircuts. I don't even know if you guys remember this, but he shaved his head coming out of the bye when they're 2-2 before that Cleveland Browns game. He hadn't done that before. It's like we think he's going full Britney Spears manic moment, and he's not only regrown that hair, cut it again, regrown it, cut it again. This is we're going on 3 haircuts now since the Eagles lost a game.
It's crazy. I mean, we see 10 straight wins from this team, and then sometimes you'll see clips of it, and it looks like the Christmas Eve episode of The Bear. Everybody's at odds. You got Nick Sirianni being turned away from his defensive line coach last week. We've got A.J. Brown asked, what's going on with his offense or what's, its issue. And he says passing, looked like the passing game got back on track yesterday. What was your assessment of that?
Yeah, and it's really important to keep in mind the context here that this Eagles team has had a very easy schedule of opponent defenses. So this is basically the only good defense they're going to have gone against in the regular season. It's the only defense ranked in the top 10 all season long that the Eagles have played. And for them to come out in this game with all the focus on the passing game, which, to be fair, had not been very good and has struggled over the past couple months, especially the last 3-4 games. They had only completed one downfield pass to A.J. Brown over the past 4 weeks. Jalen Hurts was struggling a little bit. And in this game, against the best defense they're going to play all season, for them to come out and have probably their best passing performance of the season, Jalen Hurts goes 25 of 32 for 290 yards and 2 touchdowns. It's the first time since 2022 that both A.J. Brown and Davante Smith went over 100 yards in the same game. And for them to do that with all the focus on the passing game against this defense of the Steelers that is the best they're going to play, it really did go a long way in answering a lot of questions about, can this team flip that switch in the passing game? Because that's what it's all about. Is it seems like they have the talent in the passing game with one of the best offensive lines in football, 2 of the best wide receivers in football, and a very capable quarterback in Jalen Hurts to be able to take advantage of the attention that opposing defenses are placing on Saquon Barkley in the running game. And the fact that they hadn't done that was a concern, and you did start to worry about what it was going to look like in the playoffs. Could they win a different way? And for them to do that yesterday with all the focus on it, I think everybody in Philadelphia has taken sort of a big sigh of relief. And it's now at the point where there aren't a lot of questions left for this team to answer. It's just sort of knock on wood, hope we get to the playoffs healthy.
Yeah, I was obviously pretty impressed with this win. The line was confusing to me that the Steelers were 5.5 point underdogs, but that usually makes me wonder, okay, why are the Eagles going to win this thing by more than we think? And that turned out to be the case. When you look at how this game started, you have Cooper DeJean with the fumble punt return, couple turnovers for the Eagles. Usually against a team like the Steelers, I feel like that could doom you. But the Eagles, if despite all that happening early, felt like they could have been blowing the Steelers out even earlier. And then really, I don't, if Najee Harris doesn't turn that, fumble that carry, this could have been a much closer game, but I guess credit to the Eagles for withstanding all that early, because this was really a game that they really had control of the entire time, Bo.
Yeah, there was the sort of the middle portion of the game, I guess, sort of the late second quarter, where the Steelers did make a little bit of a charge. But the truth is, I don't think that the Steelers offense was ever going to really consistently move the ball against this Eagles defense, especially with no George Pickens. They had no answers. This Eagles defense is really, really good. It's probably the best defense that I have ever covered. They're able to answer so many different questions from opposing offenses, and that Steelers offense is, it's a run on first down, run on second down, hope we can convert on third down. And the first 5 possessions of this game, they didn't even get a first down. They had those back-to-back fumbles for the Eagles. First, TJ Watt forces the Jalen Hurts fumble. They get the ball in like the 45-yard line of the Eagles, go 3 and out. Then the Cooper DeJean fumble. They get the ball at like the 11-yard line, and there's a little fight there where they get penalized, but all they settle for is a field goal, and really that was sort of it. I mean, the Eagles sort of choked the life out of this game in the second half. Steelers only had 2 possessions in the second half. They ran 11 plays the entire second half, and then Mike Tomlin punts the ball on 4th and 7 down 2 touchdowns with about 10 and a half minutes left. And the Eagles never give the ball back. They just go on a 21-play, 10.5-yard drive and run the clock out. This game was probably even more lopsided than the score might indicate. If you take into account they lost a turnover battle and still figured out a way to outgain the Steelers 401 to 163, 26 first downs to 10 first downs. This was just sort of domination.
I'm gonna let you give me a little bit of context here. I feel like I was a little pointed at the JG led defense a couple of years ago. 70+ sacks, 17 interceptions. Like, how is it better than that Super Bowl appearance Eagles defense?
So remember how I talked about this schedule of opposing defenses for the Eagles this season, like historically lopsided and very easy. It was very similar in terms of the opposing offenses that defense faced. That defense was a little bit more of a front-running defense. And if you look at it, like a bunch of those sacks came in the fourth quarter of lopsided games where it was just all pass situations. That defense was very talented and arguably more talented than this defense. But every time they played a good quarterback, and it was really only 3 or 4 times, they got sort of diced up a little bit. They didn't have a lot of answers that year. And so you saw it in the Super Bowl. I mean, the Chiefs went down and really had no trouble with that Eagles defense in that game. And so that defense was very good, but this defense is a lot better and is able to do a lot different things. And it's actually interesting from an Eagles team building perspective because it's a lot different than the defenses that Howie Roseman usually builds. I mean, that 22 defense was very much a Howie Roseman load up on the defensive line. We've got like 8 guys who are all getting a lot of money. We're a first-round picks, and we're just going to dominate the line of scrimmage. This defense is sort of succeeding because it's built back to front. They've got the 2 first and second-round picks, Quinyon Mitchell and Cooper DeJean, who have been awesome. The linebackers are better than we've seen in Philadelphia in a long time, and the defensive line is very good, but it's not as deep as it has been in years past with Howie Roseman. I mean, Nolan Smith played all but 2 defensive snaps yesterday for an edge rusher, which in Philadelphia is very rare.
Crazy.
Yeah. So, obviously a great day for the Eagles. Not only do they win, the Lions lose. And not only do they lose the game, but they had some significant injuries as well.
Yeah.
Door seems to be wide open for the Eagles to get the 1 seed here. I'm sure that's a big conversation in the aftermath of this weekend.
Yeah, everybody's thinking that, and I think it's not just that you want the 1 seed; it's that it does feel like this season has been pointing towards that Eagles-Lions inevitable clash in the NFC Championship game. And I don't want to count out the Vikings or even the Packers because I think the Packers could nip one of those teams in the playoffs. But you just think about that matchup and the difference in that matchup if it's inside versus if it's outside, and Jared Goff has to throw in the cold and the elements. And you do feel bad for the Lions, just all the injuries that they are racking up right now. But certainly the Lions' schedule is more difficult, their last 3 games. I'm not sure if they're going to get picked or not. But Eagles fans are very excited about the possibility that this could be another number 1 seed for them.
Yeah, little scheduling quirk here real quick. The Lions come to Soldier Field on Sunday. It's only their second outdoor game of the entire season. And the first one would have been, look at their schedule here, at Green Bay back on November 3rd. So obviously you talk about the weather changing and all that. We'll see how they handle it. I mean, obviously not a tough opponent. They should still beat the Bears, but that'll give us a little preview if they struggling at Soldier Field in December. It's just kind of a weird for a northern team. Certainly they have the practice ability and they can go outside and they feel the weather. It's not like they're a southern team that can't simulate it in practice, but that is just a weird scheduling quirk for them this season. And I agree that could be a factor in the playoffs.
And then they go to San Francisco the week after that, which could be a potentially spicy game. And then obviously they close with the Vikings. I think Eagles fans hoping that the Vikings don't lose before that game, because if they lose before then, Vikings probably don't have anything to play for in Week 18 against that Lions team.
Well, let's keep with that kind of conversation because big game on Philly South in DC against the Commanders, where they've played very well. Still a ton to figure out, not only as far as jockeying, going for that number 1 seed, but then also, a pretty pedestrian performance from Saquon Barkley, to relative to his standards. But, you're looking at the chase for 2K. What's your sense on, will they throttle down, you think, if they get a win over the Commanders this upcoming week and just kind of try to put themselves in the best position because they are playing the Cowboys and the Giants to finish things out?
Yeah, it's interesting, especially because Saquon got a little bit dinged up yesterday and missed most of the second quarter. This was the fewest, snaps or percentage of snaps that he's played in a game this season. Kenny Gainwell actually looked pretty good when he had to step in and made a couple nice plays as a receiver. But it's been interesting because until the Lions lost yesterday, the question was, if the Eagles have nothing to play for in Week 18, would they try to go for the record for Saquon? Would the offensive line want that? I don't think they would do that. I think they would have the bigger picture in mind. But if they're still playing for the number 1 seed, I think they're going to ride Saquon. I think it's possible they maybe try to give Gainwell a little bit more work than he had the last month or so. But yeah, I mean, as long as Saquon's healthy, they're going to give him the ball. I think they do kind of want to get to 2,000.
Bo Wulf, great stuff as always. You can follow him on Twitter at Bo_Wulf. We'll be hearing a lot more from you guys at PHLY the rest of this football season. We know that.
Thanks, guys. Enjoy the show.
We got the Eagles. We got the Eagles ready for a run deep into February. I like it. There he goes, Bo Wulf. All right. Do want to switch the conversation a little bit now to the AFC side and another team from our All-City family that appears to be headed towards the playoffs, the Denver Broncos, because they picked up a big win yesterday against the Indianapolis Colts. This felt like it could have been going a different direction, Bo, yesterday. They were actually struggling offensively early on. Indy had a lead, I think at one point by 10. It was 13-7, though, when early third quarter, when Jonathan Taylor just completely boneheaded move, fumbles the ball going into the end zone. Just one of those classic celebrating before you get in the end zone type deals where he just drops it. I will never understand it. Why it happens. It should just be ingrained in everyone's mind that you run it to the back of the end zone, then drop it. Like always. So he fumbles. That turns out to be an enormous play because Bo Nix was struggling. He had a couple interceptions in this game. So that really seemed to flip it. And then you mentioned it off the top of the show, one of the more entertaining plays of the entire day, Nick Bonito, just kind of a bizarre play call in that moment. Certainly one of those plays that when it goes horribly wrong, you question it. But for Shane Steichen to call that sort of double pass, it gets picked off. Nick Bonito read it perfectly and takes it back for the easy pick 6. And that was the game right there. So the Broncos survived. They win 31-13 and they improved to 9-5.
Huge win for the Broncos. And it was kind of felt like it was handed to them from the Indianapolis Colts. That Jonathan Taylor play would have really put that game on ice, and it changed the complexion of things where it was 13-10 going in the fourth quarter. That thing could have really given them some breathing room, and then they just fall apart. And you give Bo Nix an opportunity who really did have a tough time with ball security yesterday, kind of starts to figure it out. And you've got the Broncos offense starting to kind of click before the end of it. Really unfortunate. That's the final nail, it feels like, in the coffin of the Indianapolis Colts, and continues to give a Broncos team that was riding all the momentum even more so to lock in a wild card playoff berth going forward. They're now at 9-5. It was the 31-13 final score, I don't think is kind of tells the story of the game. It was a lot closer than that. And I think Colts fans have to be sitting there trying to pick up the pieces because it really felt like that was a game that was winnable for them.
Yeah, I mean, the Broncos, they're sitting in good shape here. Technically, you can't even rule out the 5 seed for them, but they do. Lose the head-to-head to Baltimore right now. They're both at 9-5, but ahead of the Chargers now by a game, and pretty much comfortably in position to be in the playoffs, which is certainly a success story for them. Wasn't there over under before the season like 4.5 or something like that? It was a really low number. So credit to Sean Payton for the season that they've been able to put together. Crushing blow for the Colts, who are now the first team sitting on the outside of the AFC playoff picture. Emma, if we can look at that playoff picture one more time in the AFC. I imagine, and again, the 4 teams with clinched spots, the Chiefs, the Bills, the Steelers, Texans, certainly the Ravens and Broncos look like they're in. And honestly, the Chargers, even though they lost yesterday, it would take a lot for them to lose that spot to the Colts. The Colts need to win out and get some help there too. And then the Dolphins and Bengals technically are not eliminated at this point. So, it mostly in the AFC, it seems like, Bo, we have our 7 teams, and it'll just come down to seeding here in these last few weeks. So a little anticlimactic on that side. But I find that to be an interesting group of teams to be in the playoffs on that side. Like it would seem to be okay, cool season for the Broncos. They're probably not going to win a playoff game, but they've played a lot of teams tough. They played the Chiefs down to the wire too. And if it wasn't for a blocked field goal, they probably would have beaten the Chiefs. So I don't think you can rule anything out there with any of those teams.
Do you see any benefit from getting up from 7 to 5, anywhere in between? Because we're looking at, Denver team with this win. They've got the same identical records as the Baltimore Ravens. You got the Broncos taking a big game against the Chargers here in the next 3 days. And then you've got the Bengals and Chiefs. None of those are gimmies. Those are many tough games. I think, that they probably, it's on the road against the Bengals. They might be favored, probably not. And the Chiefs will, depending on who's at quarterback, we'll see what the spread on that is. But, Baltimore, they've got the Steelers, Texans, and Browns to finish things up. So is there any benefit, because you're not hosting a game in wild card weekend in those spots, between 7 and 5 to try to really kind of go full force throughout the end of the season here if you're the Broncos or the Ravens?
Well, I think you want to stay out of the 7 spot, right? Because that's going to mean you having to go to Buffalo or Kansas City if the Bills are able to chase the Chiefs down here because of the Mahomes injury. So I think it just becomes preference there. Would you rather go to Pittsburgh or you rather go to Houston? I think you can make arguments both ways. That Steelers defense, I would be a little more concerned about probably. I think I'd probably rather go to Houston,
probably,
but neither one of those games are easy, but by any means. So I think as long as you stay out of that 7 spot, you're happy. But to me, that's plenty of incentive, to keep the foot on the gas here to make sure that you don't have to go to Buffalo to start the playoffs, because I wouldn't give the Broncos much of a chance in that game.
Yeah, it would. I mean, they're going to be up against it. Rookie quarterback on the road, no matter who they're facing, people are going to probably lean with the higher seed in that game. But still, great story. To your point, I mean, really no momentum going into the season. Everybody thought this was one of the worst rosters in the league. They've had some building blocks at some premium positions emerge. You already had Surtain already as one of the top corners in the league. Benito with his double-digit sacks this season, and his, I think that was his second trip to the end zone on the defensive side of the football. It's really playing a premium position as a pass rusher at a high level. So, and then of course the quarterback position, you're getting right there with Bo Nix.
Yeah, bless you. Let's talk about your Cardinals as we go towards the NFC West, because I think that this is one of the more fascinating situations that needs to be resolved here in these next coming weeks. So first of all, took care of business yesterday. It was interesting you bringing up that not everybody was happy about it, but certainly from the outside, knowing that this wasn't, the most marquee matchup on the schedule yesterday, I was like, okay. My only complaint at all was I don't know, for some reason I didn't like the Cardinals wearing all white jerseys at home. But that was just a weird random observation I had. Otherwise, I was like, okay, good win for the Cardinals. They obviously need to have it. We talked about the hole that they dug themselves last week, but it was a good evening for Arizona, because then Seattle goes and loses to the Packers. And so, technically, well, better than us. I mean, it's kind of what's still on the line here for Arizona. What's realistic? What can they still pull off?
What they can pull off is they can continue kind of chart their way for a collision course with the LA Rams in week 17. Now they have to take care of business against a very winnable opponent, a 3-win feisty Carolina Panthers team that I think took a step back this weekend after some good showings before that, especially from the quarterback position, Bryce Young. But this is open, I think a lot of the fan base, they opened up their gift on Christmas morning and they were disappointed by the 30-point performance from this offense. And, I kind of push back on that. Everybody wants to see Kyler Murray and Marvin Harrison Jr., your 4th overall pick, get on the same page, and it's unfortunate that they didn't. Marvin Harrison Jr., just a 2-catch performance for over 30 yards, and could have dressed it up a little bit if he could have secured a touchdown pass. It was a good well-placed ball from Kyler Murray against Chris Gonzalez, but Gonzo made a good play on it and kept Marv out of the end zone. And his day goes from, probably pedestrian to below average. And people are like, what's going on with that duo? And the Cardinals, I think, continue to be a work in progress there. But overall, offensively, 10 of 15 on third down. They're converting in key situations there. They'd scored 3 touchdowns the previous 3 games. They scored 3 offensive touchdowns in this game, 2 via the ground from James Conner, who went over 100 yards rushing. 21 first downs. Kyler Murray's performance was average. I think that the people being upset that Kyler and Marv aren't on the same page, I understand that. And I also understand that Kyler, he was bailed out from another critical pick that was waved off, negated by a roughing the passer penalty. But 23 for 30, 224, no touchdowns, no Trey McBride in the end zone for another week. He's now has the most receptions in NFL history without a receiving touchdown. And that's a bit disappointing, but he had 87 yards again, just another big performance from the tight end. And this defense, Hoge, has now kind of become the strength of this team. The Patriots put up 2 garbage time touchdowns. Before that, they'd kept them out of the end zone for 3 quarters, and they almost went 4 out of the last 5 home games without surrendering a touchdown. Before that, they get a sack from their first round pick and Darius Robinson, and a sack from the guy they acquired at the trade deadline. I mean, overall, this was a positive Sunday for the Arizona Cardinals. I'm not about to kind of say, hey, this continues to be a negative just because we don't see the duo that we've all wanted to see succeed get on the same page. But it was an efficient offensive performance. It was a strong defensive performance, and the Cardinals keep themselves in position to play a big game another big game in December.
Yeah, and that's if you guys can take care of business at Carolina next week, of course. So which you should be a win for the Cardinals, but the Panthers have been feisty. Despite losing yesterday, which we're going to talk about here in a couple of minutes anyway. So yeah, we talked about this last week. Interesting NFC West. Rams get their big win on Thursday over the 49ers. That could really push the 49ers back. Seattle can't take care of business at home last night. Really surprisingly non-competitive, I thought. Now Geno Smith's got an injury too that he's dealing with. So the door is open there. Go to Carolina, get a win, and then we'll see. That becomes one of the bigger games of the week, probably against the Rams in 2 weeks.
Yeah, we'll see if the NFL decides to flex that. We should hear within the next couple of days if that becomes one of the many prime times games with a Saturday now in play in Week 17. Do they get prime time on Saturday or Sunday? But Cards Panthers next week should push their record to 8-7, and then that big game against the Rams, and then the Cardinals, they finished the season against the San Francisco 49ers. Really, only realistic option is to win out. If they beat the Rams, though, in that Week 17, you talk about the Seahawks with the Vikings coming up after they play tonight. They play your Bears, and then the Rams in the finale. So it comes down to if the Cardinals can take care of business this week and then win a game that they haven't been able to win all season long against, an over 500 playoff caliber team in the Rams. They have a chance to change the narrative or continue it like, hey, it was nice. They took care of business against the bad teams, but they couldn't beat the good teams. Overall, progress this season, but it's not going to fight off the questions that people have about the quarterback and some of the decision making.
Well, we'll see how it goes in Carolina next week. And somebody that saw Carolina up close yesterday, our guy Joseph Hoyt, who joins us now from DLLS, covering the Cowboys. Cowboys with a win 30-14. Suddenly you look up and you're like, oh man, the Cowboys won 3 out of the last 4 games. They hadn't lost to the Bengals. We'd be talking crazy playoff comeback situation here, Joe. But a good win for the Cowboys overall, as Carolina was favored in this game, actually, which I found interesting. The first time the Panthers have been favored in 34 games.
Wow.
Yeah, it was insane. That was kind of one of the narratives we had going into this, was if you looked at how the Cowboys felt after that Cincinnati Bengals loss, they were devastated. That locker room was distraught. Even the days kind of lingering in during the week, they were really, heads down, trying to put it together. And it was a question of, hey, can they bounce back against a team that is fighting, is playing tough? I mean, you look at how Carolina played Kansas City. You look at Carolina, how they played a couple other games. They were in it. They were fighting hard. Bryce Young had figured things out. And the Cowboys came in and just looked like the same team that we've seen since the 5-game losing streak. The big theme this entire season is Mike McCarthy's future. And clearly this is a team that's still, what is there to fight for? Yeah, there's a less than 1% chance they can make the playoffs. But Mike McCarthy is something that they can fight for, and they're showing that they're willing to do that so far.
Is that a good thing for Cowboys fans? I mean, how are we reading this one as far as we talked to Clarence last week and got his thoughts on it. I mean, what's your feeling on that?
Yeah, no, I don't think a lot of Cowboys fans are probably not thrilled to hear that, to be honest with you. I think Cowboys fans have said, hey, Mike McCarthy, you win 12 games in a row, 3 straight seasons, don't have playoff success. That puts you on the question mark of whether or not you would come back this season after that demoralizing Packers loss. So why would an 8-9 season or a 7-10 season where you show a little fight down the stretch, why would that be enough to keep you? Well, I mean, I think that's kind of the question that, Jerry Jones is wrestling with. The other question is, do you want to do a coaching search at his age, and who would you go get? But Troy Aikman talked about it, and this is why he said he expects Mike McCarthy to be back next season, is because who else do you go get? In terms of resume, Troy pointed out, hey, it's Bill Belichick is probably the only guy available that would have a better resume. Well, a couple of days later, he shocked everyone and went to North Carolina. So I think that that's something that the Cowboys are trying to wrestle with right now is, do you kind of keep this thing going? A lot of players have spoken out saying we like Mike McCarthy. Dak Prescott says if he was willing to have a team with his own terms and, maybe actually spend some money this offseason, maybe things would have gone a little bit differently. So I think that they haven't made a decision yet either way. Making the next 3 games kind of interesting, but I don't think a lot of Cowboys fans are excited about the possibility of, running this back.
Yeah, they're kind of in a tough spot too, because if you're going to make a move where you're firing a coach that has won 12 games multiple times, you better know who you're getting. And like, if you're hypothetically, if they're interested in Ben Johnson, well, Ben Johnson might be playing football till February. So, usually when you fire a coach, it's a move you make the day after the season ends. You don't just let this thing linger for a few weeks and be like, oh, we can get Ben Johnson, so now we're going to fire him. It just seems like it's kind of weird how this has changed, Joe, in the last few weeks. But yeah, all of a sudden, even from my perspective, it seems more likely to me that Mike McCarthy might actually stay than it did a few weeks ago. And maybe that's just a result of them winning 3 of the last 4 games and then why it feels that way. But some of the things you brought up too and what the players have said, that's what it feels like to me. Would you lean more towards McCarthy staying at this point?
Yeah, I kind of consider it a 50-50 situation. But with me personally, like if you ask Clarence, I don't think he'll lean this way. But I kind of lean that it does feel possible. And I think a big reason why is I think they easily could have folded up and said 1-2-3 Cancun after that 5-game losing streak and just moved on, the players in that locker room, but they didn't. They kept fighting, and you kind of look at some of the guys that are fighting. For example, CeeDee Lamb has been dealing with a sprained AC joint in his shoulder for weeks now, right? Every time CeeDee Lamb hits the ground, he is in anguish, he is in pain, and he keeps going. And obviously, I think that there's some other personal aspirations. This is a guy who wants to have a Hall of Fame career. He went over the 1,000-yard mark for the 4th time in a row against the Panthers yesterday. But that's a guy that, in theory, quote, doesn't have much to play for. Same with Micah Parsons. So there's something to that, I think, and I think that that's going to be a factor in this whole discussion. Whether or not it actually happens, we'll see. But you brought up Ben Johnson there, Adam, and that's a guy that just doesn't fit what the Cowboys, the track record would say and what the Cowboys have as a structure. He's a guy that's going to kind of want control when he comes into a place. And the Cowboys, Jerry Jones is number one here. I don't know if that fits well with Ben Johnson, and I think their track record has shown they'd rather go after veteran coaches So who's out there? I mean, Mike Vrabel, maybe. That's kind of a guy you think of, but I don't know. I think it's a little bit in terms of, I mean, you kind of already have something here. Why try to see it progress rather than start over?
Got a bit of a strange question, and forgive me, my game day duties with the Cardinals, and of course I wasn't dialed into the entire Cowboys Carolina Panthers game. But I noticed this on Next Gen Stats where Cooper Rush had the first, third, and 13th lowest completion probability percentage on his 3 touchdown passes. Like 11% completion percentage to Jalen Brooks, 22 to CeeDee Lamb, and then his third was about just over 25%. I got to imagine that's a testament to guy. Was it those guys going out and making a play, or was Cooper Rush finding some tight windows? What did those look like?
Yeah, a little bit of a combination of both. I'll take you to the CeeDee Lamb one first. That was kind of it was kind of a fade route to the end zone, and Cooper put it a little bit behind him. And it was one of those plays where CeeDee made an excellent play, and he almost made it look easy. So I'd put that one more on CeeDee. But the other two, I thought that was Cooper Rush making plays. Jalen Brooks, in that back of the end, both were in the back of the end zone on scramble plays. Jalen Brooks really had to work from the other side of the field to get there. But I thought Cooper Rush made some plays yesterday, and he kind of talked about I'm getting better. Is kind of what he was saying. I'm better than I was in 2022. He's had some time now to get a feel for the offense. He also had a crucial red zone fumble yesterday. That was pretty bad. He's got some fumbling issues. But in terms of backup quarterbacks, I mean, that's kind of something I think that a lot of teams would live with is, hey, you go out and go 3 touchdowns and 1 turnover every single game. Like, that's not bad. And, the one thing about Cooper Rush, yes, QB wins can be inflated, but I think he's now 8-4 as a starter. So, I mean, that's something to at least put stock in if you're thinking about Cooper Rush potentially returning as a backup in 2025.
Hoge, listen to these stats. In 12 games starting, Cooper Rush, as you mentioned, 8-4. You can debate, quarterback wins or whatever, but over 3,000 yards passing, 60% completion percentage, 18 touchdowns to just 8 picks. Not bad.
That's what you want from a backup quarterback,
yeah.
And then some. I mean, honestly, that's why Trey Lance doesn't play, right? Like when you have when your starter goes down, that's what you want for your backup quarterback.
Yeah, Cooper Rush is a known quantity at this point. You know exactly what you're getting. Trey Lance was a huge unknown. And clearly, I mean, I think the Cowboys were kind of telling you what they think about Trey Lance through their words and their actions. They said, hey, if we want to win a game, we got to go with Cooper Rush. And I think by the action of not playing Trey Lance kind of tells you everything they know about him at this point.
Yeah, and if you're Mike McCarthy and your job might be on the line, you're looking for a contract extension. You're going to play the guy that you trust to win football games. So that appears to be mostly what's on the line here, Joe, with the Cowboys in these last 3 games. Just the status of Mike McCarthy. Good game coming up on Sunday night against Tampa Bay, the Buccaneers at Cowboy Stadium, and then at Philly, home against Washington. How do you see this thing playing out in terms of realistically finishing? I mean, the Eagles game is going to be tough, but I mean, winning 2 out of these 3 on the table?
I think on the table, but I wouldn't consider it likely. I think maybe the likeliest thing is they surprise and win one of these games, because I think the unfortunate thing for the Cowboys, and yes, they've already beat Washington at Washington, but, we look at Tampa Bay, Washington, and the Eagles. These are teams playing for something now. Some people thought maybe, hey, the Eagles would be secured in the 2 seed by this point. Maybe they'll sit some guys come week 17. Not the case. They're chasing the Lions, who now have injury issues all of a sudden. And then the Commanders obviously are in a fight for their lives for the playoffs too, in terms of that last wild card spot. And so my gut tells me that they surprise and win one of these games, but I think that probably is the extent of it. But hey, they played good football recently. And to your point, Adam, you noted this. They're one muffed punt on a blocked punt away from being on a 4-game winning streak.
Yeah. Yeah, it's crazy. It's crazy. Joe, great stuff. Follow you at Joe J. Hoyt. Always doing a great job covering the Cowboys at DLLS. Thanks, man.
Yeah, appreciate it, fellas.
All right, we're going to close out the show, Bo, by a little bit of a preview for tonight's games. Technically, there are 2, Falcons and the Raiders on that other one. By the way, Desmond Ridder sounds like we'll get the start over Aiden O'Connell, who's banged up for the Raiders. But
revenge game.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, that's right. That's how little I think about Desmond Ridder. Like, totally forgot. Yeah, it's a revenge game
that's
against
the right amount. The little you think about him is probably what you should spend thinking about. The now journeyman 4th round pick out of Cincinnati.
Yeah. So I'll set the table here a little bit for Bears and Vikings. Obviously a divisional game. Bears. These guys went to overtime a couple weeks ago at Soldier Field. Now, I will say there was a little bit of a fluky game because the Bears sort of had an insane comeback. I forget how many points it was, like in the last 20 seconds or whatever, where they erased the they got an onside kick, which never happens. They end up kicking a field goal to go to overtime, and then unfortunately Caleb Williams took a really bad sack in OT, and then the Vikings kind of controlled it from there and it ended up winning. But conceivable this could be a close game. The way things have gone here since that game was played, though, obviously the Bears had that catastrophe in Detroit at the end and then pretty much no-showed against the 49ers last week. And then the 49ers basically no-showed a few days later against the Rams and had one of their players literally quit. So it's kind of hard to figure out where this Bears team is right now. A significant development going into tonight is that Braxton Jones, their left tackle, I've never heard of this, Bo. Reported concussion symptoms yesterday morning, a full week after the game against the 49ers. And that appears to be what it's from. They're not saying it's from practice or anything. So that was a new one for me. And he's out. He did not make the trip. So there's last week, Karan Amagaji, who's a 3rd-round pick out of Yale, who's very inexperienced. He was up as the swing tackle over Larry Borum, was kind of been the Bears swing tackle for a few years now. I'll be interested to see what direction they go there, because obviously Larry Borum's got the experience, but he's always sort of been a liability when he's in there. Otherwise, you're running with an Ivy League rookie at left tackle in his first start and going up against his Vikings defense. That could be very significant tonight, trying to keep Caleb Williams upright.
I mean, that's a huge factor. What the Vikings do to confuse you pre-snap. I don't care if you do have that Ivy League education that on the football field, that's still you gotta play a lot of games to even understand what you're looking at across the line of scrimmage from Flo's defense. I don't like that. But when you start to look at this, where the Bears are in their season, we talked to Joe just then about the Cowboys. I mean, it's all about the performance from your quarterback, I would assume, Hoge. You want to see Caleb. I know he finished a little bit stronger after a disastrous first half against the 49ers. I'm sure you're just looking for a solid Caleb performance tonight, right? Am I right?
Yeah, 100%. That's why it's a little, extra concerning and disappointing to see Braxton Jones being out, because that could really hamper just sort of what progress you can even get if he's running for his life. Now, I thought Caleb and the offense did a pretty decent job of identifying some of the crazy stuff that Brian Flores does. If anything, it almost seemed like Brian Flores was a little scared of Caleb because he wasn't bringing it like he normally does. There seemed to be a feeling out process in that first matchup. So obviously adjustments are made. We'll see what and the Vikings will be at home, which can help you be a little bit aggressive, especially if you're playing with a lead. I think that's the big thing from this matchup standpoint, is this Bears defense has really fallen off. Really since the Hail Mary game in Washington. But as much as they needed to fire Matt Eberflus when they did, they fired the defensive coordinator in that process too, and he's a decent defensive play caller. And that was glaring last week against the 49ers, that they actually did miss Matt Eberflus's defensive play calling. I expect that to continue. I think this direction of this defense really leaves them in a tough spot where it's going to be hard to keep up with the Vikings tonight. But to your point, hey, they lose 40-30 and Caleb looks awesome. Like, that's a win, So we'll see. We'll see if they can do that offensively. It was certainly disappointing to see how the Bears came out in Thomas Brown's first game as interim head coach last week, and certainly if he wants to have any chance of keeping the head coaching job, you got to win these divisional games here, and the Bears do finish with three of the last 4 games against the NFC North.
The best team, I mean, just wins and losses in the league, so not favorable, but grading on a curve if you can get something going offensively there. I think from Caleb Williams, maybe see some development, maturation as far as in the pocket. Go out there, throw some darts. But yeah, the Jordan Addison, Justin Jefferson combination that you highlighted last week, I mean, that's pretty scary considering how things are trending down on the defensive side of football.
Yeah. So, and that'll cap up week 15 with tonight's games. Any final thoughts before we head into the, really the crunch time here in these last 3 weeks of the season?
After tonight, 3 games to go and a lot to figure out. It's exciting. I mean, I know, like, I would have people listen to you talk about, how fun it is. You want your team to be playing meaningful games this time of year. And even though you're not seeing what you expected from your team's offense, like we saw with the Cardinals, they're right in the thick of things. And if they can take care of business going into week 16 against Carolina, we got a big game in week 17. And that's really what you can ask for a team in year 2 under the current regime after a just tear down rebuild project. Kind of nice to see. So, but we'll be breaking down, more from the win today on PHNX Cardinals, and excited to do so. But AFC, NFC, as much as you feel like things are solidified in the playoff picture, there's still a lot to figure out. Excited to see how it plays out here the next couple of weeks.
Yeah, a lot of good games coming up next weekend, including on Thursday night with the Broncos facing the Chargers. So we will be back next week, as always, here on the All NFL Monday Huddle to break it all down as these playoff races starting to tighten up even more. For Bo Brack, I'm Adam Hoge. We'll talk to you next week.
We all silly like the mayor.